Hi guys, it's Kelly Latavola here, and I'm back with another video for W+9. Today we're going to be using a couple of different sets to create some gender neutral kind of Valentines. We're going to be using the Landscapes Borders die. I'm going to show you the big top background, but I actually loved like this snowy distressing background so much I didn't even use it. And then I'm using the Friends for All Seasons fall and winter. So I wanted something. My son is in school for the first time this year, so this is the first time I'm going to be able to kind of make multiple Valentines, and so I wanted something that was going to be able to just be given to everybody in the class. And so I picked out a couple of different combinations for Distress Oxides here, and so for the one I'm showing you, this is Salty Ocean. I'm being really, really light-handed with it because I want it to fade into white at the bottom. And then more toward the top, I'm going to use Wilted Violet. And it's going to give like a really pretty blue-violet color, which I really liked. But they're all super soft. So the one on the left is Salty Ocean and Cracked Pistachio. And then the one on the right is Wilted Violet and Picked Raspberry. Just to add some interest, because you know how I roll, I love me some shimmer and I love to break up those backgrounds. So I'm using a number 2 round brush, and the first time around I'm just putting on clean clear water just to kind of get that oxidation going, picking that up a little bit with a baby, it's not a baby wipe, it's a paper towel. So just picking up that moisture with that, because I am working on W+9 cardstock, so it isn't watercolor paper, but it is thick enough to withstand a couple of little droplets of water. I'm also going to put some Perfect Pearls in the background. So what I like to do is I just put it out on my craft mat and then add a couple of drops of water, mix it up, and then just splash it all over everything, because there can never be enough shimmer, ever. So Perfect Pearls, in the color Perfect Pearls, is more of a white/silvery shimmer, which I really love. But then the shimmer spray from W+9 is more of a whitish pink shimmer. So I'm using both of them. And I need to get a new bottle, because you'll see I tip it here and trying to get a little bit more out of it, and then what ends up happening is I end up like dumping it out, which is what a waste of shimmer. I mean, it's horrifying. So it did get on my card. I'm not concerned. The layout I had planned was already going to cover that section up, but it does give me an opportunity to show you how pink that shimmer can be when it's on the white. So they're just, in case you don't own it and wanted to see what that looked like, I love it. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful shimmer. So I used the kind of sloping hills to create some snowdrifts. Again, just cutting that out of the white W+9 cardstock. And I was able to get 4 hills out of just one 4 1/4 by 5.5 piece, because I just kept cutting off the bottom edge and I didn't need very much. So I pulled out a bunch of different stamps from those 2 stamp sets, and I'm going to be fussy cutting them out because I want to pop them up so I can snug them in really close. Stamping in Intense Black ink from Simon Says Stamp, because I'm going to be doing Copic coloring. And so basically I didn't really know what I wanted to do for the cards, because I was just kind of playing around with it. And so I had a couple of ideas, and I decided that I was just going to stamp out multiple images. I had these 3 backgrounds going, and I was just going to see which one I liked best. So we're going to color them up. You'll see little like marks above each one. That was just so I kind of numbered them so I could keep them straight in my color combinations. And then the other thing that we're kind of doing here, because again, I'm looking at something that I'm going to make multiples of, we're doing just really simple 2-color blends for Copics. I did this concept on my own channel, and it seemed to be very well received because Copics can be a little bit overwhelming. And so we're just going to very simple coloring here and still get a result that we can be happy with. So I wanted softer coloring because these backgrounds were softer, and just out of habit, I pulled out my R35 and the R59, and then I was like panic mode because I had already colored in this little snowman scarf with the R35, and I was like, the R59 is too dark. It's too dark. I wanted to just do simple blending. So I pulled out an R32, which was intended to be my lightest color, and now I'm just going over that scarf. I'm trying not to put down a huge amount of ink because I don't want it to blend out into my white snowman. But once I had lightened it up considerably, I also could have done this with the colorless blender. I did go back in and add a little bit of shading. Now that I have the proper colors picked out, so I'm using the R32 and the R35, I am going to, I couldn't think of it. I was like, well, did I use a 35? Is that a lie? So basically I filled in everything on the balloon except for a highlight with the lightest color. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of shading up from the bottom. I'm also going to do, you'll see like a little line that I do along the side that it allows for a lighter edge, which is kind of like reflective light. I chose two cooler browns for my little bear here. Like I said, I wanted to keep the colors very light to kind of match that background. Normally I start with my lightest color and then work out to my darkest, but I'm not using a 4-color blend here. So I'm actually going in with my darkest color. One of my subscribers, Pam, she frequently has questions about shading. It's just very hard for her to understand. And I get it. If it's not something that's in your wheelhouse, that can be kind of difficult to see. So one of the easiest ways you can do your shading is if there's an object laying on top of another object, i.e. his scarf laying over his neck, there's going to be a shadow around that. We call them cast shadows. So right out the gate, if you're shading something, you can put the shadows there. The other thing is there will be shading where 2 points meet. So you'll see I added shading where his legs meet his belly, where his armpits are, where his arm meets his scarf. There's going to be more shading. So those are two really simple tricks that you can just look at an image and know, okay, is one object on top of another? Yes. Add some shadows. Are 2 points meeting? Add some shadows. And then even just those simple things will help you to get a little bit more comfortable with shading your images. For this fox, there are 3 colors, but I'm not going to do really any shading on his lightest parts. So the face, the belly, and then the tip of his tail. I'm just filling those in with a light color. I'm going to go back in for his body and use an E97, which is actually a really, really pretty orangish color, but it is very desaturated. Those numbers on the end of Copics, most of the time, I don't even pay any attention to. As long as something blends, I'm happy with it. But that's how you'll know if a color is more saturated or less saturated by that first number. If that first number is high, it's going to be a desaturated color, which just means not as bright. So I filled the whole thing in with that. And then again, I'm doing the same thing. Is one object laying on top of another. So his arms covering his tail, shadow there. His scarf is coloring. Nothing's coloring but me. So I don't know what I'm talking about. And then the only other place that I added just a little bit of shading that maybe you wouldn't think to is where his nose was. And that's just going to help his kind of little nose pop forward and give him a little bit of dimension. But other than that, I just kind of did it where the 2 points are meeting. I wanted to give them a little bit of blush because they are going to be outside in a snow scene. And so their little cheeks will be red, at least in my world where all these little animals are cute and they dress snowmen. And then I'm going to just go over their cheeks very quickly with the lightest color just to kind of blend in that pink so it's not just like a blob on their cheeks. For my little bear's scarf, I'm going to use 2 colors, and you'll notice as I'm picking my color combinations, I'm picking them where they're at least 2, sometimes 4 apart. So like this one is a B00 and a B2. The distinction between them is enough that I only needed to go 2 numbers apart. But for like this one, it's a B quadruple 0 a BV quadruple 0 and a BV02. And I colored that scarf the same way for the fox, adding some red shading onto the band on the snowman's hat. And then I'm only using a 2-color blend, but I still want this hat to give the impression of black. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to leave a really strong highlight, which is just straight white. And then I'm going to fill the rest in with a C3. I'm going to go back in with a C7 and color up those edges on both the brim and the actual top hat. And then I'm just going to blend out that line a little bit with the C3. Even though we didn't use any black, it's still going to give the impression of being black. So for my balloons, I wanted them to look transparent. So I'm coloring right over the balloon that's in front with the BV color, and then doing the same thing, adding 2 little lines up the left and right side. For this one, I didn't even leave a highlight because I was just so concentrating on making sure that it was transparent. I'll go back in and add it with a white gel pen later. That's no big deal. I wanted the red color to pop forward, so I took that R32 and then just went back over that little area it's kind of sharing with the purple balloon. Very quickly, I wanted to show you, I'm doing the same thing for the round balloon, but it is a little bit of a different shape, so I wanted you to be able to see it at least one time. But again, doing the same thing. And this one, I used the same blue combination that I did for the scarf, but then I didn't like it. Same thing with the red. This is going to go on the green background, and for me, I know it doesn't make any sense, but red and green are Christmas, period. In my head, that's just the connection that I make. And so it was a little bit too red. I chose 2 pinks and went back with it and just colored right over that red to give it a more pink feel. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this blue balloon. I wanted there to be some of that kind of sea green going on since that matched my background. So I didn't do any extra shading. I just colored right over the shading that I had there with my green color, and it was sufficient. For my white gel pen, I'm going in and adding some highlights to those balloons where maybe I forgot to leave them. I'm also going to use that same white gel pen to add some details to my characters, since some of these cards are going to be pretty simple. I have a couple of different elements, but basically what I'm doing is I'm going to have 3 on one card, 2 on one card, and 1 on the other. So I did just polka dots, stripes, diagonals, big polka dots, little polka dots, and then I'm going to go back in and outline everything before I cut them out, just because I like a bold black outline. This is not necessary. Also, the fussy cutting isn't necessary if you have the dies. I do, but I just, I didn't want the white line. So when I fussy cut, I like to cut apart all my little pieces. If you try to cut them out while they're all still on one sheet, it's going to pull the paper and it's going to be very difficult. When I fussy cut, I am right hand dominant, so I hold the scissors in my right hand straight up and I use my left hand to move the paper. It gives a much smoother edge that way. So I'm just going to go ahead and fussy cut all these little guys. They're pretty basic shapes, so none of it was too much of a problem as far as like difficulty. In order to make sure that those edges are super clean, I'm going to go back in with a water-based, so I'm using a Memento Tuxedo black marker. You don't want to use an alcohol marker to do this. It'll bleed into your image. So I'm going to hold them in my hand and just kind of rub them around. Alternatively, you can put them on a scrap piece of paper and trace around them with the marker, and that will also cover up those edges. So whichever way works better for you. Once that's all done, I'm going to pop up this snowbank, and so I need to stamp my balloon strings before I do that. So I have everything kind of laid out, and then I'm going to stamp that down in W+9 black dye ink. This, and then also my sentiment. The sentiment is from the Friends for All Seasons winter set. It says, "There's no one quite like you," which I love. I thought it would be very cute for a little Valentine. And I did cut mine apart. I typically don't cut mine apart, but since I knew I was going to be making like 25 Valentines, I figured it was well worth it. And then I can just mount them together if I want to stamp it long ways again. So now that this is done, I'm going to extend those lines a little bit just because it's going to be popped up. And then I'm going to put just immense amounts of Scotch foam tape on the back of the snowbank so that it will stay popped up. This is why me spilling that shimmer spray on the bottom of the panel was not that big of a deal, because I already had plans to cover that up. For my little characters, I'm kind of going to do half and half. The balloons will be popped up completely because they're not hanging over the snowbank at all. But for all the rest of the little characters, parts of them will be hanging over, and just to make sure they're stabilized, I will put the Scotch foam tape where it'll hang over, and then use Tombow Mono multi-glue where it will actually be on the snowbank. So just going to glue all of those down. For this card is where I'm going to use the kind of the 3 different elements. I have the little bear with the heart balloons. I have the little fox, which will have the top hat in his hand, like he's going to put the little snowman's hat on. And then, of course, I will have the little snowman. I did do the one card without the snowman, just the little fox kind of because I felt like the background looked a little bit like a snowstorm, and I could get away with the sentiment "There's snowing quite like you." I used white Nuvo drops. I apologize, I forgot to turn the camera back on, just to kind of accent those sentiments. This is is it Simply White? I think it's Simply White. And then, because I just love the shimmer so much, I'm going to add more Even Clear Wink of Stella to the balloons and then all of their accessories. And then that's the whole video. So just kind of 3 different options. Even the green one could just be not even a Valentine, but just sent to someone to let them know you're thinking of them, during the winter time. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.